For the past couple weeks, it seems like all I've been working on here in the shop are brake systems with sticking brakes. That's right, brakes that are sticking or pads that are dragging on the rotors. You know, I had a 250 SL in here, beautiful 1967 Pagoda, and he had severe problems with sticking brakes because a couple of the pistons, the calipers were frozen and his rear rotors were actually getting so hot they were turning blue. And right after fixing that car, I pulled in my W116 300 SD, getting it ready for a road test, and pulled the wheels off and started checking over the calipers. The sticking brakes, overheating wheels, and sure enough, bad calipers, both with leaking seals and frozen pistons. So, you know, today I said, well, I'm going to be doing some work on the SLS system here on my 560 SEC. This is a very nice car, very well maintained, at least according to the previous owner. And I thought I'd start poking around on the brakes on this one. I go, oh no, I got to do more brake work now. You got to be kidding me. And so is the case. Remember, this is a 1988 car. So how many years old is that? That's like 28 years old. I've said it before, when these cars get over 20 years old, you need to pay special attention to your brake. And I'm going to demonstrate that because I finally decided I'm going to do a whole series of videos on sticking brakes. So this is the introduction. And I'm going to show you what's going on this car. I can tell from experience that just by looking at the wear pattern on these rotors, both the front and the rear rotors, that these pads have been dragging. Now, in a good operating brake system with a twin piston caliper like this, the pad should not be dragging on the rotors when you're driving down the road. If they are properly lubricated, if the pins are properly and the springs are tight and not fatigued or broken, if you have pistons that are well lubricated, not sticking, if you have flexible brake hoses that are not plugged up and rotting internally, all these things combined give you a good working brake system where the pads will release from the rotor. Granted, they're going to be lightly touching, but they're not going to be dragging. There's a difference, because if I turn this rotor now, I can feel a little bit of drag on the pads. So this is not optimal here. There's something wrong with this system. I'm looking down here. You know, there's no lubrication. This is all dry, rusty, and dirty down in here where the pins, clips, and pads ride in the housings of the caliper. The hoses are a little bit stiff. They're not cracked, but I can almost guarantee these are the original hoses. So I want to show you. This is kind of a little tip that will give you a clue by looking at your rotors whether or not your brakes have been dragging, or more specifically, whether or not your pads have been rubbing on the rotors excessively as you've been driving down the road on your merry way, not knowing that this problem here is going to cost me some expensive rotor repair. And I'm going to try to help you avoid that, as well as other problems you may have with your old brake systems. At first glance, these rotors don't look too bad. Look at how shiny they are. And you don't see any heavy grooving or scoring marks right here in the face, but upon closer inspection, you can see there's a considerable lip on the edge of the rotor, and there's a lip on the other side about the same thickness. That lip is almost a 1/16 of an inch high off the face of the rotor, so there's considerable wear here. But the thing I'm looking for to determine whether or not the pads have been dragging on the rotor is to check the thickness down in this area right here. If the pads are not releasing properly, I have found that you'll get more excessive wear down here on the front of the pad where it approaches this inner edge of the rotor. Now there's more wear. I can feel it here. It drops off right there, and if I put my hand on here and reach through, I can feel that the rotor is thinner right in this area than it is on the outer edge. So that tells me that the pads have not been completely releasing, if you follow me there. Those front part of the pads have been dragging, you know, causing excessive wear right there. This rotor is probably beyond limits as far as thickness. It's also wearing excessively in there where I would say this is approaching a dangerous situation, So these rotors are going to have to be replaced. Once again, at first glance, this rotor looks pretty good. This one doesn't even have much of a lip. So I would say at this edge, this is still within acceptable wear limits. But going down right in this area here, there's a huge dip. And if I take my fingers and put it on both sides, I would say the thickness of the rotor right in this area is 1/8 of an inch thinner than it is out here. So that's really been cutting down in here. This rotor is going to have to be replaced too, and it's probably the same on the other side. And it appears that since this brake system has probably not been properly maintained over the years, I'm looking at having to spend the money for brand new rotors, both front and rear. There are some other things you can do to determine whether or not your brakes are dragging or the pads are, sticking on the rotors. Some of these tests are quite easy. You can do them without removing the wheels from the car. The problem with these simple tests is they may not tell you that both pistons on the caliper are working okay. It may let you know that you don't have a frozen brake caliper and that it's probably safe to drive the car. So those initial tests are quite easy to do yourself, and I'm going to go over those in the next video in this series. I will also show you a couple other ways that you can test for the condition of your brake pistons by removing the pads. So that's the goal. In the next series, we'll go over all the tests. You've already seen the rotor inspection. Now you're going to get to see the other tests that I often perform to determine the condition of my brakes in the next video.